On your mark.
On your mark.
Get set.
Get set.
Now ready.
Ready, go.
Provocative, engaging, and usually quite a lady.
Okay, they're asking for it.
Deborah, go.
Do you know anyone that doesn't like movies? Some people love movies, and I fall in the category of I love movies. I've always loved movies. I remember as a child, my mother, she loved movies, and one of her favorite things to do was to get everything in the house settled. We have our snacks, and whenever there was a good movie with Joan Crawford or Betty Davis or Lana Turner, I mean, she had her favorites. We were watching those movies. And then, of course, there were certain movies amongst those actresses. For example, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane? If that movie was coming on, we were going to watch it. Another movie, The Bad Seed. I forget the name of the girl that played it. She actually went on and continued to act as an adult, but that movie was chilling to me. But we would watch that movie. And then when the Oscars came on, look out. We were there and we just had such a great time. So I've always loved movies. And we all have our favorite types of movies. We have the genres that we're just drawn to. You may be a suspense person. You like suspenseful movies, maybe action movies or westerns or thrillers or rom-coms. I love thrillers and I really like rom-coms and I really hate horror movies. And I could go on through the thing. Like there was a period, remember, there was a period when all of the Kung Fu movies were out. I didn't really like those movies per se, but I loved Bruce Lee, so I would watch those. So we all have our movies that we like. And when I like a movie, I will watch that movie over and over and over again. Every time that movie comes on, I am going to watch that movie. As a matter of fact, there was there was a movie I used to watch, Terms of Endearment. I would put Terms of Endearment on every single night before I went to bed. And that's how I would go to sleep, with Terms of Endearment. I knew every line, but it was still something I wanted to watch. And I even had developed such a dislike for Flap. Remember Flap? And it took me years just to accept him just as an actor, not as Flap. Now, that may sound a little bit extreme, but that's how much I love movies.
Now, just a minute. That's going too far.
We have our favorite actors. We have our favorite characters. And I can't even think of how many actors I really like. But, of course, I've got my standard, Denzel Washington, and there are many others. My favorite characters. I have to just go through my library, my mental library, and just try to pick out all of the characters that I really enjoy. When we watch our movies, you know, they have the protagonist, and this is the guy that the whole movie is based around. There's the hero, who most likely is your protagonist. There's the anti-hero, who could also be the protagonist. And the antagonist, that's the villain we all hate. Or you know what? That's the other thing. Some movies, you kind of want the bad guy to win sometimes. And I don't know if that's because the script is not well written, or is it because the script is written so well, you can't decide. I don't know. Then there's the sidekick, and we can go on and on and on. What I want to talk about, though, is about casting in movies. And this came to me because a good friend of mine, we were talking about The Little Mermaid, the newest version of The Little Mermaid. And she loves Disney movies. She likes movies that I don't particularly care for, but She's so passionate about it. I really relate to it because there are lots of movies that I'm really passionate about. She's really into Harry Potter. I can't think of all those different franchises, but a lot of them she really likes. So when we were talking about it, because I said, I'm kind of thinking about talking about movies and casting people that would not traditionally be cast in roles. And she had something to say about that. And it kind of surprised me. But her thing was she didn't feel they needed to change the character. She said she didn't feel that they needed to make her Black. So that kind of surprised me a little bit. She's Black. I'm Black. And I love it because that was her feelings. That's the way she felt about it. She didn't feel like she probably shouldn't say that because it would sound weird. But her reasoning was that the Little Mermaid, and I'm having a little bit of difficulty because I know nothing about the Little Mermaid movie. I really don't. But she says she has a couple of sisters, and I think they're of different ethnicities. What would that be? Mermaid ethnicities. But she felt it wasn't necessary to do that. And at the core, she says, because it changes the Little Mermaid that she grew up with, the one that she's always known. So that really brought it really to the point of what I want to talk about. And that's the issue of non-traditional casting. Non-traditional casting is when directors, producers, studios, whomever, when they decide to go with an actor of a race that's different than the one that the character was written as. Or sometimes they say not just race, but maybe a different sex. Maybe we'll use someone that has a disability. We don't really see that too often, though. They also call it colorblind casting, integrated casting, and blind casting. Is that an issue for you? I mean, do you have an issue especially when we're talking about remakes? Or perhaps you're familiar with a novel and they decide to make it into a book, and you've read the novel and you have imagined, or maybe they've even given a very good description of a particular character. And then when they make the movie, what the heck? The person looks nothing like it. And that's one of the things that used to bother me. Had nothing to do with non-traditional characters. But when a movie was made based on a book, I had already made in my mind the way this person looked. And then when I saw the actor, they just didn't mesh. It didn't go together. But it didn't bother me. Not if the script was really good or if the script followed the book pretty closely. And if the actor was a really good actor, I got over that really, really quickly. Take the movie The Shawshank Redemption. Every time that movie comes on television, I am going to watch that movie. I love The Shawshank Redemption. I love it. But I had never read the book that the movie was based on. The book was Rita Hayworth and Shawshank, I think it was. But in the book, the character that Morgan Freeman played was not a Black man. So by my never having read the book, I had no reference point. I just enjoyed the movie and loved the characters. But there are people who want absolutely nothing to do with the character in a movie if that character is of a different race from the one they were initially introduced to. So that would probably apply mostly to remakes or sequels or even adaptations, movies that were made from books. If that character is of a different race than the one somebody first was introduced to, lots of people, they are outraged. They don't like it at all. There's a recent example of that, and that is Queen Cleopatra, the Netflix documentary, which apparently it really wasn't a documentary, even though it was presented as such. That's the one that was executive produced by Jada Pinkett Smith. And I think she was also the narrator. Well, the controversy lied in the fact that Queen Cleopatra was presented as a Black woman. This, despite many historians established that no, she wasn't a Black woman. She was of Macedonian Greek dissent. And the outrage ensued. People just didn't like it. Even on Rotten Tomatoes, the ratings website for movies, the audience rating was 2%, okay? And the critics gave it 10%. And probably if it had not been presented as a documentary, more of a fictionalized account, a reimagining, if you will, then they probably would not have gotten the type of pushback that they received. Egypt's Minister of Tourism and Antiquities even got involved in the controversy. And what he said essentially was, listen, if you're going to present this as a documentary, you first need to be accurate. You also need to utilize the historical and the scientific facts that are clearly available. And you didn't do that. Now, I understand that there were people who were like, and Black people, not all, but many, who were like, I don't care what they say. This is what I believe, and this is what I'm going to embrace. This is what I'm going to accept. And then there were others who said, no. If it's inaccurate, it's just inaccurate. It's good as a nice piece of entertainment, but we can't accept this as a historical presentation, historically accurate. We'll put it that way. There was another big controversy with the remake of Annie. You remember from the comic strip, Little Orphan Annie, and then there was the musical back in I believe that was the 90s, Annie. And they have had, I guess, a couple of movies, but this particular version of Annie drew a storm of controversy, especially on Twitter. And I want to pronounce this little girl's name correctly, so I have to say it very slowly. Quivenjane, I believe it's Quivenjane Wallace. She played Annie, and then, what's his name? Jamie Foxx. He was Daddy Warbucks. But people were outraged. And I went back and I was looking at some of the Twitter posts there, and they were saying, this should not be called Annie. It should be called Blanny, like Black Annie. Since when is Annie Black? Hashtag Black Annie. It was just craziness. And I just couldn't help feel for the little girl, and who's a very, very talented little actress and singer. Like, man, you did your job. You went out, you did a great job, and people were angry. They hated the fact that a little Black girl played the part of Annie. She had curly hair. It wasn't red curly hair, but she has curly hair. But it was more than that. All right. So then I put a little list together of some other movies where we have non-traditional castings, as they call it. So let me look at that. And let me just go back and just give my little rating on the two we've done so far. As far as Cleopatra is concerned, controversy, pushback, justified. Because don't present it as a documentary if it's going to be clearly loose in its facts, especially when you're talking about the main character, the centerpiece of the entire documentary. If you've got it wrong about her, then that just takes away everything. Then let's go over to Annie. Controversy, not justified. And yes, I do know that Little Orphan Annie was based loosely on a little orphan. And the guy that wrote the poem, I think it was called initially The Elf Child, and then it was changed to The Orphaned Annie. Okay, back in the 1800s. But primarily, nobody really knew that as a poem. Everybody knew it as a comic strip. Okay? So, no, controversy not warranted. Now, let's go on to these other ones. All right, Scarlett Johansson. She played Motoko Kusanji in The Ghost in the Shell. And this character was a Japanese woman. And of course, Scarlett Johansson, she is a white woman. And people did not receive that very well. Not well at all. Controversy warranted? No, it isn't. Why? Because it's based on a comic. Yes, it's a Japanese comic, but it's a comic nonetheless. So they can take that kind of creative license and use whoever they want. But a lot of people didn't like it. And I kind of understand some of the argument that there were lots of Japanese actresses who would have loved to have had that role. I imagine that the producers were thinking about box office draw. So Scarlett Johansson secured the role. All right, let's go to the next one. Tilda Swinton as the Ancient One in Doctor Strange. Now, Doctor Strange was actually an Asian man. And this is like out of the Marvel comic world. Okay, that one is real easy. Controversy warranted? No. It's from a comic. You can use whoever you want. It's a comic. And they made it into a movie. But that's sorry. Lots of people were upset about it. Why is this white woman playing this Asian man? And I was looking at the photos, the pictures, and was that what she was? I couldn't even tell, was she actually supposed to be a human or not? But no, controversy not warranted. And then there was Jared Leto. He was in the Dallas Buyers Club. And he portrayed I think it was a transsexual. And the pushback was, why is this straight white man playing a transsexual? Controversy warranted? No. It's a movie. He's acting. Do you really think that every actor in a movie that portrays a straight man is actually straight? No. What if we said no gay actor can play a straight man? That would be ridiculous. Just as it's ridiculous that a straight guy can't play a gay guy or a transsexual in a movie. No controversy there. There was James Franco. He portrayed Fidel Castro in a movie. It was controversial. What was the controversy? Why is this white guy playing a Cuban? Controversy warranted? No, not at all. The actor John Leguizamo, he weighed in on that one, and he didn't like it. He did not like James Franco playing or portraying Fidel Castro. Why? He says because he's not Hispanic. So that's where the waters can get a little murky. Let's say that John Leguizamo played Fidel Castro. Now, I don't know his ethnic background, but let's say he's not Cuban. And you know what? He might be Cuban, but let's say he's not Cuban. Then Cuban people would say he's not Cuban. Or let's pick another person. Let's say a Mexican actor or a Puerto Rican actor or an Ecuadorian actor portrayed Fidel Castro. Then people would be outraged about it, or they would certainly not like it. Some would. I think most people don't really get mired down that deeply, but apparently, especially with social media, you think that most of the world does not like this idea. All right, let's see what else we have here. Let's go back to The Little Mermaid. Okay, so Halle Bailey, that's the young, talented Black actress, she portrays Ariel. Controversial? Controversy warranted? No. And to my friend's point, whom I mentioned earlier, her point really wasn't she didn't like it because Ariel was now Black. She didn't like it because it was a change from the character that she knew all of her life, that she had seen growing up. And she just thought, why change this? And she actually said, this is part of my childhood. But for a lot of the critics of this non-traditional casting, it really is about race. They don't like it. And I think the secondary thing is, this is different from what I know. This is different from what I was introduced to. So those are some distinctions. Now, let me get to the big controversy. Big, because this is the one that bugs me the most. But before we get to that, it is worth mentioning that Denzel Washington, playing in Much Ado About Nothing, playing Don Pedro, and playing Macbeth in Tragedy of Macbeth, no controversy, or probably very little controversy, because I haven't seen everything, but very little controversy. Now, why is that? Well, It could be because maybe not a lot of people are watching Shakespearean movies, possibly, even though Much Ado About Nothing, funny, but maybe didn't draw as broad an audience. That's a possibility. Controversy warranted? No. There wasn't much, if any, and there really should not have been. I mean, are we really going to twist ourselves into a knot on a story based on a guy from, the 11th century, and then loosely based on him? If people are that darn sensitive, then, I mean, come on, really. Now, maybe I'm going to get a little sensitive because I want to get over to James Bond. A few years ago, there was a lot of talk about who would play the next James Bond. And word was that actor Idris Elba, British actor Idris Elba, wanted to play the role. And there it started, the controversy. There were so many people saying, no, that could never happen. Absolutely no. You can't have a black guy playing James Bond. And one of my favorite radio talk show hosts, he was on that team. He was like, absolutely not. This cannot be. And it was so funny to me because there were maybe a handful of things that I had ever disagreed with him about, but that was a big one for me. And then came word that, now this was just a rumor, I guess, that the Broccoli family, and they're the producers, Barbara Broccoli and her half-brother, Michael Wilson, that they didn't want Idris Elba to play James Bond. Now, I later found out that wasn't really true. That opposition really didn't come from them. The opposition and some, what I thought, unnecessary criticism came from a guy, Anthony Horowitz, who had been hired by the estate of Ian Fleming, the creator of James Bond, to write some books using some unpublished materials that Ian Fleming had left. And I think the last book came out in 2022, A Mind to a Kill or something of that nature. But these are novels based again on James Bond using unpublished material from Ian Fleming. Okay, but this guy, Anthony Horowitz, he adamantly opposed Idris Elba playing James Bond. He said that Idris Elba was too street, quote unquote, too street, and also that he was not suave enough. And I'm thinking to myself, no, he's a great actor. I think he's a very good actor, especially in The Office. I don't know if you watched The Office. I love those episodes when he came to Dunder Mifflin. But I digress. But no. And then I saw this photograph of Idris in a tuxedo. And my goodness, I said, there he is. There's your next James Bond. Well, of course, that was not to be. The next one was Daniel Craig, who was an excellent James Bond. Loved Daniel Craig as James Bond. Although I did get a little bit tired of his lips always being pursed. But that was, I guess, part of his charm. I don't know. So I recently read in Variety, the entertainment industry magazine, where Barbara Broccoli and her half-brother, they basically said they don't think that Idris Elba would want to play James Bond. And that's probably because in recent years, last couple of years, Idris has been saying that that's just not something that is his goal. It's no longer his goal for his career. And I guess after waiting darn near a decade and nobody's saying that you're going to be the next one, he has to stay focused on continuing to build his career. Now, Barbara Broccoli, she said that it takes like a 10 to 12 year commitment. If you're going to play Bond, you need to be able to give them 10 to 12 years. I guess that's because you make a series of movies, and that's something that Idris may not want to do. Now, there were others quoted in the article who were saying that Idris is too old, that Barbara Broccoli and Mike Wilson, they want someone younger. They only want someone in their 30s. Okay? And Idris, I know he has to be in his 40s. So he's too old to play the role. And then I was thinking, you know what? If he's too old, and if we're just going to do the non-traditional casting, or in this case, I don't think we should call it the non-traditional casting. Maybe they also call it colorblind casting. If you're going to do the colorblind casting, in this case, what about that guy, Reggae Jean Page from, what is it, Bridgerton? The Shonda Rhimes show? That guy, oh yeah, definitely could be a James Bond. Now, at first I thought, no, well, maybe not. Maybe he's just too young. And then I went and I started doing my research and I wanted to know, well, what have been the ages of the guys who have played James Bond? And you know what? They've run from 20s all the way up to 57. And that 57-year-old was David Niven, who I totally forgot. He did play in the James Bond movie, I think as Mr. James Bond or Sir James Bond in Casino Royale. And the thing about that is he was friends with somebody in the whole production thing, and they got him that part in that particular movie. But Ian Fleming wanted David Niven to be James Bond before Sean Connery. Isn't that something? Now, looking at the list of guys that have played James Bond, remember that guy, George Lazenby? I know you don't, because I really didn't either. I had to look up the list. Well, he actually was the youngest one to play James Bond. He was 29 years old. But Sean Connery, excellent James Bond. Excellent. Really. Timothy Dalton, not excellent. Just okay. And I'm being generous there. Roger Moore. I would love to say excellent, but I just cannot. In all honesty, I cannot. Why? Because I kept thinking of him as being the saint. I thought of him as being the saint portraying James Bond, the saint masquerading as James Bond. I never could fully accept him as James Bond. Plus, it was just a little too elegant to be James Bond. Pierce Brosnan, excellent James Bond. Daniel Craig, excellent James Bond. And I think that Idris Elba, who I don't know his exact age, but I think he would be an excellent James Bond. And no, he's not too street, and he is suave enough, if you ask me. And then, of course, like I said, that Regé Jean Page, he would be good as well if you're going to do the colorblind casting. Now, I have to add this. Sam Mendes, who has been a director on a couple of the James Bond movies, including Skyfall and Spectre, he says if he has his way, he'd love for a woman to play James Bond. No. Sorry, no. Controversy warranted? Yes. Why? Because look at the history of James Bond. Now, I guess I'm sounding like the people from Annie or something like that, the critics of Annie. But no, this is very, very different. You can have a female Bond, but she needs to be Janie Bond or something like that. Agent 008 or Agent 006. But not Agent 007. No. And then I was wondering, okay, so if Mendes gets his way and they do decide to cast a woman, and please don't think that that's out of the realm of possibility because it could happen. I mean, would she also live her life like James Bond? I mean, she could be physically agile and, very cool. But would she like sleep with guys all the time? I think that would kind of take away from her. So yeah, if you want to do a female secret spy agent, make her another specialized agent. Give her 008, 006, never 007. So the next time that there is a colorblind cast or casting on a new movie, and there will be others, instead of burning up Twitter in protest over this casting decision and hurting a talented little girl's feelings, why don't we put together some self-governing rules? Number one, If the character is based on a comic book character, get a grip. It's a fictional character. And if this fictional character is based loosely on a real life person, just take it easy. If the character is comprised of several different people, kind of like with James Bond, then, relax. It'll be okay. And then number 2, if the character's race, and regardless of the race, but if the character's race isn't central to the story, it's okay. This is art. We can handle this, and we actually can enjoy it. Now, if the character's race is central to the story, like Tom Robinson in To Kill a Mockingbird, then okay, you may have a legitimate complaint. But when I really think about it, actually, the character of Tom Robinson, it didn't have to be a black character. And I know, the story was written in this southern town and all of that, but he really could have been an Asian. If they remade To Kill a Mockingbird and they used an Asian guy, or they used a Hispanic man, that story would still have the same, I think, weight and meaning. It wouldn't change anything. But I just thought of a movie that you really could not change the race. You could not substitute and do the colorblind casting. And it's a movie I watch every single time it's on television. The Godfather. You can't swap out Michael Corleone and put Joseph Johnson in there. It just wouldn't make sense. So there, I'm standing with that one. Number 3, if a movie, and especially if a documentary, purports to be factual, and they change the race of, let's say, Dr. Martin Luther King, or they make Margaret Sanger, we see her as an Asian woman or a black woman, then, have at it. Launch your criticisms at them. That would make perfectly good sense. I guess the finale to this discussion is that when it's all said and done, it really is all about the bottom line. And if movie makers, if studios and production companies and producers, people that lay out lots of money, if they are not going to recoup their investment, they are not going to continue to do things that cause them to lose money. I was looking at the box office receipts for The Little Mermaid, and they made so far $13 million, which is a lot of money, but they spent $250 million, and in the U.S., somewhere in the area of 200 some odd million dollars, with the rest of the money, the receipts coming from overseas. But again, $412, $13, $14 million. While it is a lot of money, it's not Disney money for a movie. And their remakes have been pretty successful. This one, I understand, is like the first not to break the $1 billion mark. So it could be the last. And back to my friend again, that also was one of her criticisms. She says she's sick of these live action remakes. So maybe others are feeling the very same way.
That's a wrap.